Chapter 15. Maya. There was a sudden rush of air, quiet but forceful, and Caleb's voice now came interposed between her and their unexpected visitor. "Who's there? You'd best explain yourself immediately." He was answered with a low chortle. "My good elf, if I'd meant to harm y'all, I wouldn't have announced myself. You're obviously both fumbling blind. I am not so disadvantaged. So if I were you, I wouldn't get quite so riled." A woman's pleasant tenor cut through the darkness like a beam of sunlight. Kendra laid her hand on Caleb's tense shoulder, gesturing for patience. "Your little lady's friends got the right idea, big fella. Kendra, was it?" Yes, hello. Kendra Aberth, pleased to make your acquaintance," she rattled off reflexively. She smiled nervously, her heart still racing. "Well now, you don't know that yet, do you?" mused the voice. "I haven't jumped you yet, certainly, but I still could. You don't know who I am, so I reckon it'd be hard for you to say whether or not making my acquaintance will be pleasing or no. Best not be hasty is all I mean to say." Kendra's eyebrows raised, and in spite of herself, she nearly laughed. "That's sound enough advice," she agreed. "I suppose my greeting was optimistic, but in fairness, I think you'd be hard-pressed to make our situation much worse." "Oh, things can always get worse," the voice replied with a drawl. "There's some that might not take kindly to an elf and a human wandering about where they weren't invited, discussing the killing of one of the familiars. Strange guests indeed, with strange tidings. Some might even go so far as to say they'd be unwelcome. Not me, fortunately. I don't make such quick judgments. Rushing into things gets you ass over kettle into a dung heap, like as not." The stranger rattled on in much the same way. Her manner of speech was a touch overwhelming, as if each meandering thought found its way into her mouth. Kendra raised a hand cautiously. "I don't mean to interrupt, but could I please ask who you are?" "She's a dwarf," said Caleb with distaste. "The speech pattern is distinctive." "Too true," chirped the dwarf merrily. "I can see you are busy people sitting here in your hole, so I'll refrain from any undue digressions. I'm Maya, daughter of Kaya, daughter of Kael, daughter of Zael, and so on, all the ways to the beginning." Kendra nodded, feeling the perplexitude setting in. "A pleasure to meet you, Maya. Hopefully," she added. "What brings you to our hole?" "This lovely establishment?" asked Maya cheerily. "Well, not to put too fine a point on it, but I think you'll find I was here first. You even patted me on my back when you came in, but I think you took me for a rock." "It's not such a hard mistake to make," muttered Caleb. "That's true enough as well, Master Elf. Caleb, was it? I certainly wouldn't take offense to the mistake, for there's many a fine and personable rock in the garden I'd be honored to be mistaken for. Yes, I was just resting mighty deep for a while here, so much so that I confess I was a bit slow to greet you properly, and by the time I'd gotten my tongue loosened and my head straight, the two of you got to storytelling and truth-telling, and it seemed nearly as rude to interrupt as to listen in. I'd also be lying if I said I weren't a bit curious. I do enjoy a good tale, and it's been a while." Kendra frowned quizzically. "You were lying on the ground in here. How long is a while, exactly? Is everything all right? If it's not impolite to ask." "Dwarves like taking their time," Caleb interjected coolly. "They're known to sit down and go nearly catatonic when they feel the need. Sometimes for a day, sometimes for the lifespan of an empire." "You certainly seem a learned sort of fellow, Mr. Caleb," Maya said, tone genial and complimentary. Yes, I had a lot to think on. I couldn't tell you fully how long. It can be hard to tell that sort of thing down here, and worrying about it can get in the way of a real and proper consideration. I went down below around the time that things started properly going to pieces up there. What happened? Kendra asked, hushed. We were traveling through under the impression that there was a community living here. Did any manage to escape those monsters? Do you know what they are? Escape those things. For the first time, Maya sounded less jovial, a little heavy. I'm afraid not, except in yours truly, of course. There's rather a lot of those monsters, which would make sense. It was a decent-sized community here in the Black House. To answer your other question, those monsters are dwarves. Kendra shivered as a chill ran down her spine, and she heard Caleb shifting next to her, unsettled. How is that possible? He demanded, openly appalled. What the hell could do something like that? There was silence for a while, until Kendra almost thought Maya had slipped back away as quietly as she'd come. Then she spoke, solemn and slow. I've been down here thinking on that for a long time, trying to think if I can figure just what it was, or if I could have done anything differently, or if there's anything to be done now. But the truth is, I am as ignorant as I was powerless. All I know is this. Something passed through my home. A shadow, a madness, something. It started fast and was over within the day, so I didn't see so much. I reckon anyone who saw more than I did would have been too close to get away. But whatever it was, it set brother on brother, mother on daughter, until we'd torn ourselves to pieces. But I think something was taking our faces, wearing them, slipping among us, and by then it was too late. All that was left are the husks you've met above. I think you're right, Kendra said quietly, faintly sick to her stomach. We've met something like that before. Thomas's memory lay heavy on her mind. His death had an unreality to it. She'd not seen a body, and his face was never far, even now, following, grinning. Had he even been denied a clean death? Was he somewhere far away, in pain, a shambling, faceless horror? It's been following us, attacking us, and it always looks like a friend, but we don't really know anything about it, except that it's incredibly dangerous. Whatever it is, this face-stealer, Caleb said, is not known in the lore of the dwarves, or humans, or even elves. It must be a novel specimen, something new. His voice came crisply academic. It was easier that way for him, Kendra reflected, and she could not begrudge him it. Her fingernails were still sunk firmly into her legs as she took deliberate, calming breaths. Oh, something very old indeed, countered Maya. Those libraries of yours certainly hold a whole mess of rarefied materials, but things still are lost over the years. Scraps of paper are only so good for so long. Wouldn't you agree, Mr. Caleb? Her voice had regained most of its earlier ease, playful and mellow. Perhaps a bit of an oversimplification, Caleb said through gritted teeth, and Kendra hid a shaky smile. She could just picture his glower. Elvish record-keeping is legendary, of course, but obviously discrepancies can crop up, gaps in the record. Often the source materials are innately limited, or through no fault of the archivists. Of course, Maya agreed pleasantly, and everybody makes mistakes after all. Miss Maya, Kendra cut in before Caleb could take offense to any accusations of erroneous record-keeping. Speculations aside, do you know of any way we could get out of here? I think you were privy to all of our conversations before, so you know we're in a bit of a desperate situation. Any help or suggestions would be greatly appreciated." "Oh, just Maya, Kendra," she replied smoothly. "And perhaps I owe you an apology. Here I am, making pleasant banter while y'all are clearly in distress. Please accept my assurances that I wouldn't be jawing away so casually if you were truly in such a fix. Fortunately, this desperate situation of yours has an elegant enough sort of solution." For the first time, Kendra heard Maya move, with a sound like a boulder standing up. There was some rumbling, and Kendra gasped. Suddenly, there was light, seemingly blinding, and Kendra covered her eyes in shock. Her mind ran immediately to cave-ins and suffocating earth collapsing atop them, but she held back that edge of panic, mastering herself. After several moments, she peered through slit eyes at the scene, newly lit. Maya stood silhouetted in a small gap that she seemed to have been covering. A pale glow, not nearly so shockingly bright as it had first appeared, obscured her features almost entirely in a halo of light. But Kendra could see that Maya was shorter than her by at least a head, solidly built, with a gentle ease in her posture. As Kendra watched, Maya beckoned. "Come, we've still got a lot to talk about, and it's high time I was moving again." With that, she began to shuffle away without ceremony. Kendra looked to Caleb, saw his squinting grimace, and shrugged, bemused. After a calming breath, she followed Maya into the light.